After being away for 26 years, the Streets of Rage series made a triumphant return this week with Streets of Rage 4. Developed by Guard Crush Games, Lizard Cube, and .emu, the game mixes a great hand-drawn visual styling with smart tweaks to the classic gameplay formula that keeps it feeling like the original titles, while still being a great continuation to them. Simply put, the game and the teams involved deserve all of the success and positive reception they are seeing. But during those 26 years, there were numerous attempts to continue on the classic trilogy in various ways. Some were official, some were approved and then cancelled, and some were just hopes from those who loved the games and wanted to evolve it in their own way. So today, I'd like to compile all of the cancelled Streets of Rage projects I'm aware of into one video. Of course, all my sources will be linked in the description, who did the hard work to allow a chump like me to make a video like this. So, let's go straight into it. Our story begins in the middle of the 1990s. Core Design, a game studio in the UK that would go on to create the Tomb Raider series, had pitched a Streets of Rage continuation to Sega to release on the Sega Saturn. This new Streets of Rage was to be a 3D beat-em-up, evolving the series past its 2D roots into an entirely new dimension. However, in an interview, a member of Core Design shared that Sega had declined their pitch and planned to continue the franchise in its own way. Taking it in stride while seeing an opportunity, Core Design opted to take their pitch and make it a multi-platform title and make it with their own property. At this point, the game was renamed Fighting Force, with an intended release on the Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and a release for home PCs. The reasoning is murky, but the Saturn release never happened despite purportedly being completed. However, in 2008, DRX, a user known for documenting and releasing prototypes, shared an early prototype of the Saturn version online. The game had already shifted to being Fighting Force by this time, of course, but it's the closest thing we have on the timeline to that Streets of Rage 4 pitch. The game's final release received mixed reviews, with a lot of praise for being able to interact with the environment, but not really pushing the gameplay much beyond what was seen in 2D beat-em-ups of the time. Fighting Force is the type of game that's probably able to be appreciated more now with nostalgia goggles for that era on. Speaking of that era though, that wasn't the only proposed 3D Streets of Rage game from that time. However, this one is a bit different, as it's the only one we know of to have been produced internally by Sega of Japan. Video has since leaked online of a very early Streets of Rage prototype seemingly planned for the Sega Dreamcast. The footage shows Axel, a series mainstay, navigating 3D environments while facing a number of enemy thugs in urban settings. Interestingly, it also shows a first-person mode for a short moment, possibly indicating there would have been occasional first-person moments to help signify an advancement away from the series' 2D roots. The last interesting thing to note is two identical Axel character models squaring off against one thug, which, if I were to read into it, suggests that they were planning on having a two-player mode like earlier entries, but that's just my own speculation. As is obvious from the footage, the prototype didn't get very far. There's claims online that new Sega of America management pushed back against the prototype, claiming that a beat-em-up wouldn't sell, but I'm not really convinced that Sega of America could override a proposal from Sega of Japan to the point of outright cancellation. But hey, maybe it's true. For a long time, all we knew about the Dreamcast Streets of Rage project was all that this video shared, but we did get a few more morsels in late 2015, when series composer Yuzo Koshiro shared some concept art for the game on his Twitter. Dated from September 1999, the art shows characters that display similarities to past Streets of Rage protagonists, but are all actually new characters, one of which was to be Axel's son, Axel Jr. While any other work on this game is likely lost to time, hopefully, if anything more remains, it appears online someday so we can get a better glimpse into what was planned for this game. With two Streets of Rage sequels having not seen the light of day, it was beginning to seem like there would just never be a continuation of the series. So in 2003, an entirely fan-made project began, known as Streets of Rage Remake. Over the span of 8 entire years, a Spanish developer named Bomberlink, in addition to a team of other contributors, toiled away at the project. And over those 8 years, it grew into a very ambitious and impressive tribute to the original trilogy, featuring 103 playable stages, a remixed soundtrack, options to configure the game to select your favorite mechanic of each series' entry, rather accurate gameplay, new weapons, optional routes, new characters, and a level editor as the cherry on top. Yeah, honestly, this project is crazy and sculpt and is a true blessing, with all of it running on entirely original coding. Throughout the production of the game, Bomberlink had attempted to notify Sega a couple times that he had been working on the project, presumably reaching out in the hopes of being legally clear to keep making the game. He never heard back, so he kept working, all the way until the final version, version 5, was released in early 2011 to very positive reception. However, a short time after that release, Bomberlink reached out to the community saying that he had been served a cease and desist from Sega on the project, advising him to remove all the links to the project from his website, and with him requesting that others not upload the game for others to download. A spokesperson from Sega emailed wire.co.uk with a statement saying, "Sega is committed to supporting any fans that take an interest in our games, and where possible we do so by involving them in beta tests and other development, marketing, or research opportunities. However, we need to protect our intellectual property rights, and this may result in us requesting that our fans remove online imagery, videos, or games in some instances." But of course, the internet is the internet, and to this day it is very easy to procure the game for yourself and play it. This is where the story of Streets of Rage Remake ends, and it goes to show how much has changed in 9 years. It's actually very weird to look back at this story now, in an age where Sega encourages users to upload mods to their games over Steam, and even contracted many community members to develop Sonic Mania. It's certainly a stark contrast, and it's hard not to imagine what could have resulted from a potential partnership from both sides, or even just Sega looking the other way and allowing this project to continue in peace. But alas, like I said, this game is still easily obtainable and is still immensely impressive to this day. Somewhat surprisingly, that isn't the only remake of Streets of Rage that was being worked on during the 2000s. Grin Barcelona, a satellite studio of the since-closed Grin studio based in Sweden, had previously been working on a Strider reboot that was eventually cancelled by Capcom. After that, they began work on a remake of the first Streets of Rage that was set to be published by Sega. A few screenshots and concept art pieces made their way online eventually, giving an idea of what the game might have looked like. It was meant to be a downloadable title for the PS3 360 era, which might help explain why the game looks a bit less aesthetically pleasing than one might imagine. Supposedly, a playable prototype of this is out there on a hard drive somewhere, but for now, this is the only indication we have of what we were set to receive. It's from that sad note that we move back into an array of various pitches over the years that got to varying stages of completion. The first of which is concept art from a former artist at Backbone Entertainment, both for a new Streets of Rage title and even a new eSWAT title. Backbone was responsible for a lot of ports of Sega games throughout the 2000s, and even wound up making the Sonic Rivals series, so it's quite possible Sega had just asked for a lot of pitches for their properties from them, and the Rivals titles were a result of that. But again, that's purely speculation on my behalf. The artwork shows quite a few characters from the series in a new style, but we don't have any further information on if these pitches ever got past the pieces of art you're seeing. The next pitch came from Ruffian Games, who are mostly known for developing Crackdown 2 for the Xbox 360, but have collaborated on a number of titles with Microsoft. After a multiplayer mode they had developed for Rise, Son of Rome was cancelled, Ruffian began working on a number of projects. As Sean Noonan notes on his personal website, one of those was a Streets of Rage pitch to Sega. His website indicates that he was the project lead on it for 6 months, having done quite a ton of pre-production on it. Built in CryEngine 3, you can see from this initial prototype completed in 6 weeks, the project was quite stylized and it cut above most of the pitches to Sega we've seen over the years for studios to make new entries with their IP. It also coincidentally featured some first-person ideas, much like the old Dreamcast pitch. Unfortunately, we don't have much of an idea of which characters would be included or how they would play into a potential plot. Despite half a year going into it, the project was defunded by Sega for unknown reasons in 2012. My own personal feelings on it is that this could have become something interesting after development had truly begun on it. Based on what's been shared, it's easy to decry the game for being too dark and maybe too different from what made the series so iconic in the 90s, but this isn't footage that was made to impress consumers like us. It was made to show Sega they had what it took to make an interesting product with their IP, and at that, I think it succeeds. Either way, I'm thankful we have this generous glimpse into what could have been. And the last pitch we can look at today comes again from within Sega, though this time from their now defunct studio, Sega Studios Australia. You might remember them as the team who made the Castle of Illusion remake, or as the ones who were once considered to make Sonic 4 Episode 3 Once Upon a Spell. Sega Studios Australia showed a lot of promise during their existence and made a lot of pitches, including a hypothetical Crazy Taxi 4 at one point, though this probably didn't get far beyond a slideshow or perhaps even just this piece of art. Where this wraps back around to Streets of Rage is perhaps the craziest pitch on this list, a series of remakes called Sega Reborn. As reported by Kotaku back in 2013, Sega Reborn would have been a string of remakes to classic Sega titles, specifically ones like Golden Axe, Altered Beast, Shinobi, and, of course, Streets of Rage. These remakes would have been full-on graphical updates while also making small tweaks and adding new content onto the existing content and layouts of these original titles. The wildest part of it all was that, in addition, Sega Reborn would have seen these titles somehow being combined into one shared timeline. Somehow. I'll just quote the Kotaku article here directly. Except for the meta story, of course, which was going to be subtle and implemented as more of an underlying mythology, mostly for marketing, than as key parts of each individual game's plot. So it sounds like it wouldn't have been too invasive to the original identities of these games. Honestly, this sounds really dumb, but the fun kind of dumb that I can really appreciate. Every time I remember this pitch, I actually get kind of sad that it didn't really go anywhere. Unfortunately, Sega Studios Australia met an early demise, announcing their closure in April 2013, and then ironically announcing the Castle Evolution remake shortly after announcing their impending closure. Rough luck there. They seem to be a very talented and ambitious team, and it's honestly a shame that they closed down, since I think Sega would have been all the better for keeping them around. Perhaps someday we'll hear more about why that happened, but in the meantime, we just have to appreciate the energy they hoped to bring to the company's portfolio. So, as of right now, these are all the cancelled Streets of Rage games and pitches. At least that I know about. I'm sure there's one or two I missed, and I'm even more certain that there's more that we simply don't know about. For example, I found an artist with 2 Streets of Rage models, which was supposedly part of a 2011 pitch, but there's nothing really said about it beyond that. This, of course, brings us to the modern day, where after a beautiful remake of the Sega Master System's Wonder Boy 3 The Dragon's Trap, Lizard Cube and .emu approached Sega about producing a Streets of Rage title and began work in early 2018 alongside Guard Crush Games. It was an immensely long road to get to Streets of Rage 4, but as you can now clearly see, it wasn't for lack of trying. A lot of people hoped to continue that legacy over the past 26 years, and hopefully now that we finally have a wonderful new entry, we can have an even greater appreciation of the proposals that helped lead us to this point. If you'd like to hear me talk about another beat-em-up game, you can check out my review of The Takeover by following the link. And to keep hearing me talk about Sega, feel free to consider subscribing. Otherwise, thank you for dropping by, and do take care. I'd like to thank my patrons again for their support, such as Buckles Chucklo, The Legend of Groose, Potate Jello, Goldstorm07, Patrick Thompson, Jeet, Calico Plus, The Crazy Even, and Svendelica. Thank you.